The day the Republic died, the galaxy applauded. The Clone Wars ended, the Senate thundered with cheers, and a tired civilization convinced itself that a single steady hand could keep them safe. They called him Emperor Palpatine, savior, guardian against chaos. HoloNets replayed his promises until they sounded like truth: order, security, and peace. But in truth, the real ruler of the galaxy was Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith. He had engineered the war, arranged the purge, and crowned himself in the smoke of a dying Jedi Order. The brilliance of his victory wasn't just power, it was secrecy. For over 2 decades, Emperor Palpatine's greatest weapon was that almost no one knew he was the very Sith Lord the Jedi had hunted. So who did know that he was a Sith Lord? Let's go over the handful who learned, the few who were told, and the even fewer who survived knowing during the reign of the Empire. These are the people who carried the most dangerous truth in the galaxy, that the Emperor and Darth Sidious were one and the same. Obviously, the story of secrecy begins where all Sith empires begin, with the Apprentice. When the Empire rose, Darth Vader became the living boundary between the Emperor's public face and his hidden nature. To governors and moffs, he was the Emperor's iron fist. To the few who glimpsed behind the curtain, he was one half of the Rule of Two, sworn to his Sith master. Vader carried out the kinds of errands that erase witnesses and bury rumors where no one will ever find them. He knew everything because he had to. He knew the rituals that stoked his master's power, the contingencies planted for the day the Empire might fall, and the price of failure measured in ash and lightning. When secrets threatened to breathe, Vader was the suffocating hand. When the truth tried to stand, he was the blade that cut its legs away. If Vader policed the truth with fear, Mas Amida policed it with access. He was the Grand Vizier, the towering silhouette beside Palpatine from Senate days to Imperial Knights, the bureaucrat who understood that the right door closed at the right moment can be more final than any execution. He didn't need to be told who the Emperor really was. Years at the Chancellor's elbow had taught him enough to stop asking questions. Amida turned the Imperial Court into a labyrinth, and at its center sat a throne no one reached without his blessing. Petitions vanished, appointments shifted, meetings ended early with polite smiles and cold eyes. If a senator probed too deeply, if a general wondered too loudly, Amida rerouted the river before it could carve a canyon. People left his office reassured or unnerved or suddenly transferred, anything but enlightened. The Emperor's secrets stayed intact because he ensured that Palpatine was always exactly where the Empire needed him to be, visible enough to seem ordinary, but distant enough to remain unknowable. Amida was the velvet rope between Palpatine and the truth. Where Amida controlled the hallways, Sly Moore haunted the shadows. She had stood behind Palpatine in the final years of the Republic, silent and watchful, a presence the cameras learned to ignore. Moore was more than an aide. She was a confidant who understood what the Sith Rule of Two meant and what it demanded from everyone hovering near its heat. Her work was the kind that leaves no record. A murmured suggestion at the perfect moment, a dossier that arrives exactly when a governor's doubts begin, a quiet visit to remind a wavering official that the Emperor values discretion more than loyalty. People remembered the chill of her gaze and forgot why they had felt it. That was the point. Moore's reward for impeccable service was to vanish. The archives go thin on her after the early Imperial years, the way records do when someone important becomes even more useful invisible. In truth, she kept the Emperor's secrets by becoming one herself. When the few Jedi survivors scattered, the Emperor didn't trust chance to finish the job. He tasked Vader with training a corps of hunters, fallen students, broken knights, blunt instruments tuned to a single pitch. The Inquisitorius learned to track the Jedi like bloodhounds, to smell hope on the wind and run it to the ground. Some truths can only be kept by saying them plainly to those who must obey. In audiences with the Emperor, Inquisitors learned a boundary carved in stone. They were not Sith, and never would be. There are only two, he and Vader. The lesson was doctrine and warning. It told them what the galaxy must never know, and what they must never aspire to become. They carried that knowledge like a brand. For some, it fueled a bitter devotion. For others, a terrified obedience. Either way, the result was the same. The Emperor's hunters knew whose shadow they served, and still they hunted. If secrecy was a wall, the Inquisitors were its razor wire. Most advisors wore titles like shields: minister, counselor, treasurer. Yup Tashu wore a mask. He draped himself in relics and spoke of the dark side with the kind of reverence that makes sober men uncomfortable. While Moffs counted supply lines and governors counted taxes, Tashu counted omens. He didn't need convincing, he didn't need proof. To Tashu, the Emperor's reign was not a political era but a prophecy fulfilled, the Sith rising from 1,000 years of whispering to speak in a single voice. He praised Sidious the way acolytes praise gods, and if anyone laughed, they did it in rooms where Tashu could not hear them. Even zealotry has its purpose. When the Emperor needed the court to accept a ritual as policy or a relic as strategy, Tashu translated superstition into governance. The faithful are hard to interrogate. They volunteer nothing because they think secrets are sacraments. In that way, Tashu protected the truth not with silence, but with worship. Some servants are meant to be seen. Gallius Rax was bred not to be. A child lifted from the dust of Jakku, folded into the Emperor's long mathematics, Rax was taught that empires are machines, and machines require failsafes. If the master fell, the master plan would not. To trust someone with a dead man's switch, you teach him what he's detonating. Rax learned the shape of the Emperor's mind, the blind spots he tolerated, the dangers he feared, the maps he drew in case his throne ever went empty. He understood the rule of two as logistics, how to preserve the idea when the man couldn't be preserved. Where others clutched power, Rax clutched instructions. He knew the codes, the coordinates, the steps that must follow the unthinkable. He wasn't guarding a person, he was guarding a design, and to guard it, he had to know exactly who authored it, the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Empires have soldiers, courts have advisors, but Sith have knives. Ochi of Bestoon was one of them. He answered to the Emperor directly, moving on tasks that never appeared on an admiral's manifest or a governor's slate. If a threat sprouted where the Empire couldn't reach or shouldn't be seen reaching, Ochi pruned it. He didn't confuse the Emperor's titles. He didn't call him Your Majesty in his heart. He called him by the truth, the Sith Lord who wrote the orders in a hand steady with purpose. Ochi didn't serve the Empire, he served the Sith. Men like Ochi didn't keep secrets because they are loyal. They keep them because saying them out loud would make the galaxy make sense, and they prefer it senseless. His silence served the Emperor because the Emperor's name served his pride. Ochi didn't fear the dark. He believed he worked for it. Not everyone who knew about Darth Sidious served the throne. Two ghosts carried the truth into the age of the Empire, Obi-Wan and Yoda. They had seen the mask slip in the last days of the Republic. Exile teaches a different kind of discipline. To live with a secret that could ignite rebellion and yet refuse to speak it requires a faith most people don't possess. Faith that telling the truth at the wrong time kills the future. Obi-Wan watched a boy become a man under Tatooine's twin suns. Yoda listened to a galaxy breathe from the marsh of a forgotten world. They waited because waiting was the only way the truth could eventually matter. Silence isn't surrender, it's investment. Their knowledge survived not in broadsides and speeches, but in a spark passed to the right hands when the moment came. Until then, the two most credible witnesses to the Emperor's identity lived as rumors and old stories. That was by their own design. Some truths are learned the hard way and never heal right. Eneb Rey was a spy who slipped into the Imperial court with the confidence of a professional. He was trying to assassinate the Emperor. He had the disguises polished, the contacts vetted, the escape routes memorized. Assassinations are just timing layered over nerve. He had both, up until he didn't. Rey found himself within reach of the most powerful man in the galaxy, and discovered that that power had a shape. Crackling, suffocating, inevitable lightning. The Emperor attacked him with the Force. Sith lightning. This wasn't politics with fists. This was the sorcery of the Sith. But Rey managed to survive as he fell from the Emperor's shuttle. Survival should have felt like victory, but it felt like an indictment. Rey crawled back into the shadows with the knowledge that the rebellion's enemy wasn't merely an empire, but a secret embedded in a man. He carried the truth the way some men carry shrapnel. Painful, undeniable, and impossible to remove. Ryloth's freedom fighters learned the truth in a crash site and a killing ground. Their ambush was supposed to be clean. Isolate the shuttle, separate the targets, and finish the war for their people in a single blaze of courage. However, those plans did not survive. Face-to-face erases myths. The Emperor wasn't a fragile old man guarded by a monster. He was one monster guarded by another. Lightning found metal, lightsabers found air, and hope found the kind of realization that makes knees buckle. The throne did not hide a weak man. It protected a strong one from witnesses. Many of the Twi'lek freedom fighters that day saw that the Emperor was a Sith Lord, wielding a crimson lightsaber and shooting lightning from his fingers. However, very few lived to tell the tale. Most criminals fight empires to protect business, but Kira aimed higher. Crimson Dawn's networks threaded through the rot where laws go to die, and from that vantage point she mapped the silhouette behind the Empire. She came to the conclusion that you don't topple the Empire by nibbling at its borders, you decapitate the two Sith at the top. She made allies of people who would never share a table, gathered artifacts forged for rituals no court would sanction, and built a plan that stabbed not at the fleet or the finances, but at the bond between master and apprentice. Kira's war wasn't about credits, territory, or prestige. It was about destroying the Sith to topple the Empire. Even if she failed, the attempt itself proved something rare in the Imperial era. Not just that she was aware Palpatine was a Sith Lord, but someone had identified that truth and then moved to destroy him because of it. To assault a secret, Kira hired marauders, dark-side adepts who owed the Sith nothing. The Knights of Ren were feared across the Outer Rim. When they crossed sabers with Vader, they learned why legends are often warnings. You don't need a lecture on Sith doctrine when you felt the weight behind an apprentice's blow, and if there is an apprentice, there is a master. Through Kira's briefings and their own injuries, the Knights grasped the outline of the truth. The Emperor was not merely a tyrant, but the true Sith master in the shadows. The Knights of Ren were not heroes or saints, but for a brief time they were witnesses. The kind that walk away and keep walking because turning back means admitting you survived something that shouldn't have let you. There were two Imperials that didn't need to be told in order to figure out the truth. Wilhuff Tarkin understood that the Emperor was more than a politician with scars. He didn't need to mouth the word Sith to taste it in the air. He saw too much, commanded too long, and counted too few coincidences to believe the official story. He deduced that Darth Vader was most likely Anakin Skywalker, meaning that if Darth Vader was a Sith, the Emperor was likely one too. Grand Admiral Thrawn also realized that Darth Vader was most likely Anakin Skywalker. If the apprentice was once a Jedi, who made him what he is now? Thrawn was too precise to ask a question he already knew the answer to, and too practical to say it aloud. But he knew that Emperor Palpatine was most likely a Sith Lord. The triumph of Darth Sidious was not just that he killed the Jedi or crowned himself Emperor. It was that he convinced the galaxy to stop looking for him. He turned terror into routine and routine into sleep. For 20 years, the loudest thing about his rule was the marching of stormtroopers' boots, not the whisper behind them. This is the true ledger of the Imperial era, not just the deeds, but the knowledge behind them. In the end, the Empire was sustained by Star Destroyers and superweapons, but it was built on secrets. And like all secrets, it could be kept only until the right people knew it, and the right moment arrived to do something about it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did, and as always, may the Force be with you.